Good evening, Houdat Nation, and happy Wednesday to our Bayou Blitz family. I hope everybody is doing well out there. Lord knows we have a whole lot of news to bring to you this evening, but I hope everybody is having a good week. I am Bob Rose. I am one of your co-hosts to your Bayou Blitz podcast. Joining me is my partner in crime and a duo that will be bringing you big news about halfway through the show, Brendan Boylan. Brendan, happy Wednesday.
Yeah, happy Wednesday to you. I also wanted to throw out for those of you in the southeastern coast regions and in Florida, I hope you guys are staying safe.
Yeah.
I know that hurricane hit hard. Touched down at least this morning. We saw some effects here in Charlotte, just rain, really, nothing more than that. But I know that it's kind of making its way, and even Wilmington, North Carolina is going to get hit really hard. So for you guys that are in the path or have already fought through the path, I hope you guys are staying healthy, safe, and well, because your guys' health and safety is much more important than us talking about a 53-man roster. So hope everybody's doing okay this evening. And yeah, Bob and I have some fun news to talk about. Personally, we have some Saints news to talk about in terms of a 53-man roster. We have, I don't know if you want to call it like drama moves, but hint, we got more guys going to Denver if you haven't heard, and some guys coming from New Orleans to Denver and potentially back to New Orleans, but we'll get into all of that. I don't want to give too much of it away. Bob, let's start with the big news, right? The 53-man roster. Mm-hmm. You'll see some people in journalism call it the final 53-man roster. You'll have some people call it the initial 53-man roster. I think for the title of this podcast, I put one, and in the description, I put the other. So I'm very much on the fence. I don't know which way to go because it's never final, right? Yep. The roster is never final. There's changes every week, and that's why Bob and I have jobs in the field, because if it was the same 53 guys, more than half of our work would probably get knocked out every week because we wouldn't have to talk about people getting elevated, people getting put on injured reserve, people getting cut or traded. But no, it is an initial 53-man roster. And, Bob, I don't mean to pat ourselves on the back because you and I hate doing that. We're not big heads at all. We don't ourselves. If you guys watch this show, you know how much Bob and I just hate talking about when we're right. But I think we actually got a lot of this correct.
Yeah.
If you go back and watch the archives of last week's Bayou Blitz, I think we got a lot of it right. I haven't sat there and actually checked all the boxes, but I'd say, if any, we only missed one or two. So I'd say, what is that batting average? If we go 50 for 53, we're in the Hall of Fame, right? So yeah. I think we did pretty well. So let's go ahead and start from top to bottom. I'm going right off of the article that you wrote for the Saints News Network. If you guys did not keep up with the Saints news this week, you missed out because they had everything you needed. They had a cuts tracker. They had a practice squad tracker, which we'll get to a little bit later. And they were really the keys of all the information you needed when you were trying to keep up with all of this, because it was a little more chaotic this year, Bob.
Yeah.
Especially for you guys there with the Saints News Network, because opposed to multiple cut days, you only had one. Which is the first time the NFL has done that. So opposed to cutting it down a little by little every week, you just had Twitter or X or whatever it's called just flying in. You had your phone, people texting you, calling you. Your phone was probably going off all day long with different updates and being in touch with the guys who were down with down in New Orleans with John and Ross and even Kyle out in Houston. I'm sure all of you guys all day long, it was just like a constant bzz, bzz, bzz. Yeah. So you guys missed out if you didn't keep up with all of it with Saints news. I know Bob put in a lot of hours in getting all this news out. So we'll go ahead and we'll reward Bob. We'll read right off of his work, and we'll start with the quarterbacks. Bob, there's no shocks here.
None whatsoever. I mean, Derek Carr was brought in to be the Saints starter, for the, certainly the immediate future. There's no reason to believe that, that's going to change anytime soon. Jameis Winston, despite some fan rumors, that he might be dealt, there was never anything anything significant to that. Winston is arguably, and in our opinion, Brandon and I share this one, the most talented backup quarterback in the National Football League. Jake Haener, because he's the third stringer. He had some impressive preseason moments, but Jake's going to get a chance to sort of digest and develop the mental aspect of his game, and learn the Saints playbook from the mental side of it before being thrown into the fire. Because let's face facts, if your third string quarterback sees the field really at all in any significant action, your season went sideways really fast. And Saints fans, you don't have to look any further than a year ago to know what I'm talking about.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, at the end of the day, there's no surprises. I'm with you. Jameis and another former Saint and Andy Dalton, probably the two of the top 5 best backup quarterbacks in football. You could probably even narrow it down and say 2 of the 3 best if you wanted to throw a third name out there. John Butler, Trevor Siemian time. Yeah. You know the season we're talking about.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I mean, there's no shocks at quarterback. Running back, not really any shocks either.
I disagree.
You disagree? I mean, is he a running back? Is he a receiver? I guess that's the one we could sit there, because I think we both had him getting cut, or at least coming back on the practice squad, which is still a possibility. Just because you make the initial doesn't mean you're there all year. So we'll talk about the running backs. Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, Kendre Miller, those should be no shocks. The one that Bob's referring to, and again, I say this almost jokingly because I understand that he's converted to running back, but the Saints have done this so much with guys in the past. Do they ever really give up their initial position? You know what I'm saying? Like i.e. Taysom Hill, do they ever really give it up? I don't know. Kirk Merritt is considered a running back, made the 53. Adam Prentice, fullbacks are people too. I've been saying that for years. Fullbacks are people, guys. You can select them in fantasy football, and they certainly ruined some fantasy football days. I.e. there, just for your Saints historians, some of you guys will certainly get a kick out of this. How about Mike Carney's 3 touchdown day back in 2006 in Dallas? I used to have that. I don't think that's behind me anymore. I have a game ball from that. I have Joe Horn's game ball from that game. That's not behind me. I guess it's somewhere else anyway. And then John Kuhn. I don't know if he ever did it in New Orleans, but he certainly did it in Green Bay a handful of times. I'm certain he did it one year in New Orleans. So fullbacks are people too. Prentice makes the 53 man. You say Kirk Merritt surprises you. It was a guy that I think both of us recognized the team saw as valuable. Mm-hmm. But we did not think he'd make the 53. We thought he would be a guy who'd be stashed on the practice squad. He ends up squeaking into the 53. Your thoughts on the running backs?
And squeaking onto the 53 as a surprise. And here's why I'm surprised too. Kirk Merritt missed almost all of the last 3 weeks of training camp and both the last 2 preseason games because of injury. He was vastly outperformed by Ellis Merriweather, who we'll get into him a little bit later in the show. Ellis did not make the initial cut on the 53. And as we've been telling you guys over and over, Alvin Kamara, and you folks know this, Alvin Kamara is suspended for the first 3 games of the regular season. While Kamara is on the suspended list, which took effect today, he does not count as a roster spot. So a lot of us felt sure that the Saints would keep a Merriweather or an experienced back like Darrell Williams, who also didn't make the cut. They went with Merritt, largely because of his athleticism and versatility, and potentially could return kicks too if he's healthy. Now, another thing to watch, and this should take place in the next 24 to 36 hours. Kirk Merritt and a couple other names that we'll mention when we get further down on the depth on the position chart. Now that the 53-man rosters have initially been set, you can place a player on injured reserve and and bring them back during the course of the season. You can place a player on the PUP list, physically unable to perform, and bring them back during the course of the season. So we don't know where Merritt is at in his rehab. It's a distinct possibility that the Saints kept him on the active roster initially to protect him, then turn around and put him on the PUP list or short-term injured reserve. So that way they don't have to worry about someone else poaching him. And they can fill another roster spot until Merritt is ready to come back, and then make a roster decision on him.
I will note that, at least for now, Dennis Allen said he does not expect anyone to go on injured reserve, but you have to take that tongue in cheek, because why would you show your cards this early? Right. And if you need a good example of that, just go back and watch any Sean Payton press conference. Ever. And don't get me wrong, I loved Sean. I loved covering Sean. I loved all of it while he was here, because that was the cheekiness of Sean Payton. And it's just his cleverness and how he felt he got an upper hand. Receivers. This is one where I felt really good about my predictions, and my predictions were right. And so the no-brainers here: Olave, Thomas, Rashid Shaheed, right? Those are your no-brainers. After that, it got to be a little, and Bob and I talked about this all summer long, it got to be like, you look at the roster and you go, oh, that guy would be a good guy to keep. That guy would be a good 4th or 5th receiver to keep. And then you realize you did that for the whole training camp roster. So these are the guys that made it. Can I officially call it your draft crush from last season?
Sure.
Like the 2023 draft crush? Because everybody has them. So
you can. But if we're going to, then I'd like to bring up the fact that I mock drafted Kendre Miller, Nick Saldiveri, A.T. Perry, and Isaiah Foskey, all to the Saints in my preseason, in my pre-draft mocks. So,
I mean, but does anything really beat the year the Saints have 2 first-round picks and we both get them right? That's all I'm saying. I'm saying. The Olave Penning year is definitely a highlight for me, because arguably it's more difficult to mock multiple guys through multiple rounds, because you just never know.
Right.
So I'll tip my hat to you there. But getting 2 guys in the first round, especially when the Saints traded up to get to one of them, I don't know. I'll let you guys in the comments discuss which one you think is more impressive for Bob: getting 2 first-round picks one year, or getting multiple guys throughout this draft.
Not to much. Four
of 6, or 4 of they have 6, right?
4 of 7.
Say I had 7. I don't know. There's so much trading there at the back end. I don't remember off the top of my head. But A.T. Perry, Bob's draft crush, makes the 53-man. Very impressive in the preseason. Had really nice days in training camp. So that shouldn't be a shock. My guy, Keith Kirkwood, fellow Neptune Township native, he makes the 53-man after an impressive camp and an impressive preseason. And I'll say this because it's going to segue into the last guy who made the team. The Saints really value experience, whether it's experience in your system, experience in other systems, and just NFL experience in general. That's why, on top of the fact he had a good preseason, that's why I think Keith made the team. But that's also why a guy we didn't see at all in the preseason, and Traquan Smith, made the team. The Saints really value experience within their system. Bob's favorite player, obviously. I know some of you guys in the chat, especially last week, were talking about, it's finally time to move on from Traquan Smith.
We cautioned you.
And we told you it's not going to happen.
Well, we at least said, you said that, and I said I'll believe it happens when it actually happens. It didn't happen.
It didn't happen
yet.
Unless whatever injury he's got going on ends up being a super long nagging injury, I don't foresee him going anywhere. It's the last year of his contract. It's like $2 million. It's not a lot against your cap. It's a guy who has experience in your system, and whether you want him to be a mentor to some of these guys or not, because you have a lot of young guys that are on this roster and guys that are going to be in and out off the practice squad, being signed off the streets, all that stuff. We'll get into some of those names here in a little bit. Whether you want him to be a mentor or not, the fact that he has this many years of NFL experience within this system, working with these offensive coaches, it is valuable. In a sense, I think it's valuable. Bob may disagree with me, but those
it's valuable look, Brendan. It's valuable if the man can play. He can't. And I've thrown out the abysmal statistics in articles. I've thrown them out on this show multiple times, so I'm not going to rehash that. I will say, obviously, I have. It almost seems like a personal grudge against Traquan Smith at this stage, but I will also admit that if the Saints were to keep 6 receivers, I felt 100% sure that one of those guys would be a return specialist. A Lynn Bowden, a John Trey Kirkland. It wasn't. Now, again, we haven't, as Brendan said, we haven't seen Traquan Smith physically seen. This is not in the hypothetical sense. We've not physically seen Traquan Smith in over 3 weeks. So again, just like with Merritt and a couple other players that will, there are to be named, it's entirely possible that the Saints felt like, okay, we'll protect him on our initial 53-man, because at some point he's going to be ready. So now maybe we'll place him on short-term injured reserve, which, by the way, folks, if you're on, at this stage, if you're placed on injured reserve, you have to miss a minimum of 4 games, not 4 weeks, 4 games before you can return. But you still can return. So if they choose to do this with Traquan, Kirk Merritt, Landon Young, somebody like that, that protects their roster spot, but it also creates a roster spot once they're placed on these injured lists, so they can elevate a player from their practice squad, sign a guy off waivers, and when this injured player is ready to come back, then you can make a roster decision.
Yeah, a lot of people in our comments.
I see.
Yeah. Anna saying, "I'm so tired of hearing he knows the system," but he does. And I might just be the annoying talking head here, but the Saints really value that. And you look at the roster cuts over the last however many years.
They do.
They value that almost more than anything. How long have you been here? Do you know what we want to do? It's not the Sean Payton offense anymore, but obviously Carmichael and Payton's DNA are kind of intertwined at this point with how many years they were together in New Orleans. And you hear multiple people that we've talked to over the years, other people in the national media say, at the end of the day, like, playing football is playing football, and it's just terminology differences here and there. But people say the Saints offense and their terms and their calls, and especially when Drew was there, the checks and everything was one of the hardest offenses to grasp. I don't know. I've never seen the playbook, but I would imagine, a standard playbook might be like that large, and the Saints is like that large. I think that's why the Saints value that as much as they do. I'm with you though, Bob, is if this is a guy that, 4 or 5 weeks from now still can't play, do you release him with injury settlement and that kind of thing? You could. That is a possibility. And we'll get into it too, but the Saints certainly kept a lot of young, talented receivers in their build as well, which is going to put pressure on Keith Kirkwood. It's going to put pressure on Traquan Smith. It's going to put pressure on A.T. Perry. So it's not like the Saints just said, all right, all those receivers that made plays during the preseason, we'll see you later. They definitely kept some of those guys around. Let's move to tight ends. I don't think there's any shocks here either whatsoever. Extremely happy to see that Jimmy Graham made the team. There was that scare with his health issues. I didn't know how much that was going to affect him just personally. Like, forget football. I didn't know how that was going to affect him and how the doctors were going to evaluate him and was he going to be cleared and this and that. Being at his age, if they saw or thought there was something severe going on, would it even be safe for him to play? Right. So I'm happy to see he was even on the field playing. It had some signature Jimmy Graham moments. Yeah. Even though it was a preseason game. And the pump fake dunk was a nice touch. Juwan Johnson makes the team. Duh. Foster Moreau makes the team. Another guy very much like Jimmy Graham. Didn't know where his health was. Really happy to see Foster Moreau contribute throughout the trading camp, the preseason, and be healthy. And then Taysom Hill, who could literally fill just about any spot position-wise on this list, but he makes the team as well. I do want to note this because I saw an article that was published by Kyle T. Mosley earlier for you guys that follow the Saints News Network really closely. He talked about some guys in the national media calling Juwan Johnson a potential fantasy breakout star.
Mm-hmm.
I want to counter that for those of you who followed my fantasy coverage last year. He's not a breakout star because he broke out last year.
Mm-hmm.
Juwan was like top 10 tight end in fantasy last year and led all tight ends in touchdowns for a large stretch of the season. With Jimmy being there, I don't know how it's going to cut into red zone targets for Juwan Johnson. Now, Juwan's not a guy you're going to draft extremely high, but if you need a tight end or you're somebody who maybe misses out on the really big name tight ends and you run a little bit of a system, whatever tight end's got a better matchup, Juwan's definitely a guy to look at. He's not a breakthrough athlete or a breakthrough tight end in fantasy this year because he showed it a season ago. But anyway, tight ends, no surprises. Yeah.
Yeah, none for me. Again, Juwan, Foster Moreau, never in jeopardy. For you Lucas Krull fans out there, Lucas Krull was not going to make Lucas Krull's fate was sealed the day that they signed Jimmy Graham. As long as Jimmy could still play, even to a small degree, Jimmy showed that he could. For other people that were saying, the Saints aren't going to carry 4 tight ends. Have you ever watched Taysom Hill play football? He might be listed as a tight end, but he's not a tight end. And all NFL teams carry 3 tight ends on their active roster. Maybe not all 3 are active, are game day actives, but I think we'll see a lot of occasions where the Saints do activate all 3 of these guys, and obviously Hill, if healthy, will be activated too. The only thing that I have to say about that is, to you other folks that I'll respond to, and saying, this isn't the 2011 Jimmy Graham. No, it's not. But he doesn't have to be. He's still 6'7". He can still catch a football, and he still knows how to run routes. He's not the athlete he once was. Really not even close. But he's only going to be counted on to play about 12 to 15 snaps a game. In certain third down situations and definitely near the goal line. You folks tell me that you wouldn't like to see, okay, put yourself in a defensive back's shoes or a defensive coordinator's shoes. You got Jimmy Graham lining up against you when the Saints are lining up on your 7-yard line. Say the Saints come out in a 3 tight end formation. What NFL team can say that they have a Jimmy Graham as your number 3 tight end? Usually a third tight end. That's not a receiving threat at all. This is a little bit different, folks. This Saints offense is going to be a different animal this year.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing too: is a lot of times, and you referenced the third tight end, but a lot of teams after the first tight end, you don't really have a receiving threat at tight end. It's like 2 extra blockers essentially. The Saints have 3 legitimate receiving options at tight end. So I'm going to take your point. I'm going to turn it up a little bit. So if the Saints come out and, let's say the Saints go 5 wide just because they can. And you have Mike Thomas, Chris Olave, Jimmy Graham, Juwan Johnson, Rashid Shaheed set up. How would you want to defend that? Because you got 2 guys that are 6'7", Mike Thomas, one of the most physical guys in the league, and then you have Shaheed and Olave, who are both fantastic route runners. I mean, by no means do we want to sit here and say, well, on paper, the Saints have the greatest offense that's ever lived. But
no, 2011 was the greatest offense that ever lived.
Exactly. But on paper, the Saints offense is leaps and bounds over the last couple seasons. Now, a lot can happen between now and even the first week of the season. But as long as everybody stays healthy and the offensive line does their job, this is going to be a pretty scary offense. Speaking of offensive line, let's get right to it. Saints keep 9 offensive linemen on the initial 53. So we'll go ahead and I guess we'll go starters. Left to right, Penning, Pete, McCoy, Ruiz, Ramczyk. Reserves, Hurst, Saldiveri, Young, and Garcia. I think the only one that surprises me, and it's because you and I really liked him over the years, was Throckmorton.
A little bit.
But other than that, makes a lot of sense. A lot of names everybody's familiar with. I don't see any problems with the 9 that they kept.
I expected them to keep 9. And I've said many times, the Saints still have a very, very good starting 5. And you mentioned Pete among the starters. It wouldn't surprise, and I know he's been hurt. Andrews has again. It would not surprise me if James Hurst opened the year as the starting left guard. Because Hurst has been playing pretty well in that spot with Pete out. But nonetheless, you could say that the Saints have a starting 6. The 5 that you mentioned, plus the Hurst Pete. That's a quality offensive line if they're healthy. The problem is they haven't been healthy. Not for 3 years. And problem number 2, and a bigger problem, is none of these backups, none of them played worth a damn this preseason. In fact, I could argue that they got worse through each preseason game. So while I expected them to keep 9, and while you had to keep 9 from your own guys on the active roster, on the initial active roster, I do expect a lot of shuffling at this position, and for the Saints to bring in other names that they've seen get released, just to kick the tires on. Landon Young has been hurt. He did dress against Houston, so that's significant. But that's a guy that, we talked about Merritt. We talked about Traquan Smith. Landon Young is another guy who, if he isn't going to be ready to go by week 1, he could now be placed on short-term injured reserve or PUP list. Saldiveri, he didn't play well, don't get me wrong, but you knew they were going to keep him because they not only invested a 4th-round pick in him, they traded up to get him. Max Garcia, what saved Max so far is the fact that he has so much starting experience in the NFL. Max Garcia has been absolutely putrid, a human turnstile. But really, again, that whole second and third string offensive line all preseason, Throckmorton included, were human turnstiles. So they made the decision. They kept what you have to feel. And again, you look at guys like Lewis Kidd, awful, but has a little bit of experience. Mark Evans, who played reasonably well, and a couple other guys, Tommy Kramer, Alex Filstrom, etc. They kept a guy like Max Garcia over him because, as you keep pointing out, Brendan, it's a recurring theme. Max brings what? Experience. So that's where we sit as of right now.
Well, before we move to the defensive side of the ball and talk about the 53-man roster, Bob and I did say we had some news. Some rather exciting news, and seeing how many of you guys wanted to hang out with us tonight, I think it's an appropriate time to kind of break this news to you. So I wrote up, I guess, an official statement. How official are we, Bob? I don't know. We hang out and we talk on Wednesday nights. We're official. I mean, I guess. One day when we're doing it in our PJs, maybe we won't be official, but I'm pretty close. Let's be honest.
Look, I wore a shirt at the beach for our show. That makes us official.
Amen. Because the first time, there wasn't. We had fireworks. We had the whole show going on. But nonetheless, Bob and I are excited to officially announce that we have joined the Pro Sports Fans app, or PSF, for their inaugural football season to bring you guys, Who Dat Nation, even more Saints coverage this year. So go download the PSF app and join the Saints fans chat room to catch our weekly and post-game show, the Big Easy Brigade. We can't wait to connect with all of you guys on the PSF app. So go ahead and download it now in the App Store for Apple iOS. It is soon coming to Android as well. I know Bob's waiting for that. So we're really excited to bring that news to you guys. Now, some of you might be asking, whoa, what does that mean for the Bayou Blitz? Bayou Blitz doesn't change. We're still going to be here Wednesday nights. If you noticed what I said, even more Saints coverage. So we're going to be here with you Wednesday nights. We're also going to be with you tentatively Friday nights on PSF for a shorter show, potentially not an hour, looking a little closer to 30, 45 minutes to talk to you guys about the injury reports, what's going on headed into the weekend. And then, of course, everybody loves post-game coverage. And everybody wants to talk after the game's over. So the great thing with this app, it is exactly what you guys are doing now. It is a chat room with right now over 2,500 Saints fans in that Saints fans chat room. You guys are going to be able to see us go live at the top of your screen. You guys are going to be able to comment and chat. And we might even bring some of you guys into that chat. I know we talked about it with this. Unfortunately, the programming we have here, not the easiest thing to do with pro sports fans. It's super easy to click a button, bring you guys in, and we can all chat it up post game. So we're really excited for all of that. Bob, what you got?
I'm with you. I mean, I'm excited. It's a new app that's launching at least for NFL coverage this year. The folks at PSF, they reached out to Brendan, individually, and Brendan was kind enough or insane enough. I don't know which yet. To mixed, to include me in. PSF announced, had their official announcement that they were adding Brendan to their team. It was either today or yesterday. They haven't announced yours truly yet, so I don't know. Maybe I'm going to be the man in the shadows. I'm okay with that. And like Brendan said, we're excited because it gives you guys the chance. It allows you to be even more interactive, with your show. I'm very anxious for the app to come out, in Android because I have, Android technology, and I know that right now I realize that a lot of people are more inclined for Apple technology, but it kind of cuts the viewership in half until you open it up for all avenues that way. But we keep telling you week after week after week, this is your show. We are your hosts, and this is your product. So this is yet another way for you guys to make this grow. As Brendan said, we're tentatively looking at a Friday evening broadcast live, and another. For post-game shows, I don't think we're going to do prime time, Saints prime time games, but definitely the Sunday, Sunday afternoon games. If you followed us, that already for the last couple of years, Brennan and I have given you pregame shows, given you halftime shows. I don't know if the halftime will continue. The pregame certainly will. And we don't know what, that might be on PSF. It might be through Saints News Network. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to bring you your Bayou Blitz. For now, anyway, it will still be an independent entity. And then we're just sprinkling in a post-game show. And depending on the time of year, draft, a big game, an especially big game coming up, things like that. We have the option to give you other shows as well. So it gives us a lot more freedom and allows us to give you more exposure to your product.
Yeah, and to your team. And I think what Bob just said there and referenced is the nice thing about this is that we can pop on at say there's some big breaking news that happens, a big trade happens during the year, and you don't want to wait till Wednesday to hear about it. Well, Bob and I can just pop on the app, go live in the chat room. If you're at work or you guys miss it, everything's archived. You just have to go back, hit past streams, and then you can watch it and catch up.
Mm-hmm.
And I do want to share just a couple things before we close on this point. This is from Sean Salisbury, the president of the app. You guys might know him from his time with ESPN. Sean said that the best things about the PSF app is that You, the fans, are going to be included in everything Bob and I do. Very literally. There's nothing pre-recorded. It's all live. We're able to chat and communicate with you guys at all times. It is kind of social media-esque too. So everybody has a profile. You're going to be able to message us, all that great stuff. The other thing was we're going to be able just to let it rip. There's really no restrictions. Bob and I have kept it pretty PG over the years, but this gives Bob the opportunity to go into that PG-13 range. You guys might want to do that. And then, like I said, we can bring you guys into the show, and we can chat it up and banter with you guys about just what's going on with the Saints, or, shoot, we've had a lot of games that have been frustrating to watch over the years, and you guys want to talk about it. You guys want to banter with us, or you guys who are sitting here and saying, well, here's Brendan. Brendan's sitting here talking about, Traquan has, experience. He knows the system. We'll bring you in. We can chat about it face to face. So I don't know if that's dangerous for me or not. But nonetheless, we're excited. Again, go ahead and download PSF, the app, Pro Sports Fans, in the App Store on iOS. It's coming soon to Android. Join the Saints fan chat room. And then, of course, we're going to be tweeting all this stuff out. Well, we're excited to have you guys join us over there. We're excited for a new venture, a new adventure, a new opportunity. And who would have thought? Bob and I met over a radio show in 2016. So being able to do now a second show with you under a new name, a little weird. We'll have to get used to. What's going to be bad is when we confuse the two show names.
Oh yeah, and at my age, it's going to happen.
No, I'm going to do it. I'm going to say, oh, well, it's welcome to the Bayou Blitz. I mean, the Big Easy Brigade. I mean, the thing with the B that references New Orleans. Like
the easy Bayou Blitzing Brigade.
Yeah, exactly. See, thank you. Exactly. It's going to happen. Let's get back to Saints football. 53-man roster. We talked about the offense. We thank you guys for hearing our announcement, and all you guys that are going to follow us over to the Pro Sports Fans app as well. But let's talk about the defense. Let's talk about the 53-man initial roster. Defensively, the Saints keep 5 defensive ends. Should be no surprises here. I guess you could make the push for Nico because he had a great preseason, but these guys are, well, we talked about experience, right? And how much the Saints value that. Each one of these guys has experience with the Saints and other teams in the NFL. Cam Jordan, Carl Granderson, Peyton Turner, Passanio, really the only one with experience elsewhere. And then Isaiah Foskey, the draft pick. Bob, no surprises here.
None whatsoever. And I get the fan push for Nico Lalos. And he had a monstrous preseason. But I want you to consider 2 things. Number one, Lalo's got most of his production against third teamers. Not to diminish what he did, because I like him as a player myself. But the second thing to consider is just that Lalos was the victim of the numbers game. Cam Jordan's not going anywhere. He's still one of the best defensive ends in pro football. Unless you were going to make, what would have been a somewhat surprising trade of a very underrated Carl Granderson or an equally underrated, Tano Passanio, then those guys were going to have spots. Peyton Turner, I got news for you folks. He had a very, very strong, not only preseason, but was consistently good throughout training camp. It looks like the light is finally coming on for him. And if so, that strengthens an already very good edge rotation anyway. And even if Peyton Turner was only so-so, the Saints weren't going to give up on him just yet. He's a first-round pick, remember. And speaking of giving up on, for some insane reason, some of you want to give up on Isaiah Foskey. The man hasn't even played a professional football game that counts yet. And he's a second-round pick. He's not going anywhere. And from what I've seen, and I wrote an article on this earlier today, Foskey already looked a lot better by the end of the preseason than he did at the beginning. So we'll see how he develops. New Orleans was never going to keep any more than 5 defensive ends, and unfortunately, that left a guy like Nico Lalos on the outside looking in.
Let's talk about the defensive tackles, another position where there's really no surprises here. However, there's no surprises, but there's a lot of new faces, might be the best way to put it. Brian Brisset, first-round pick out of Clemson. Kalen Saunders, Nathan Shepard, two big signings for the Saints in the offseason at that position. And then the only familiar face out of the bunch, Malcolm Roach. That rounds out the 4 defensive tackles. Saints keep 9 on the defensive line. Another position where we really don't have to dive too deep into this. It's all pretty logical. All makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really anxious to see this group during the regular season. They impressed me. All 4 of them did individually and as a group. They impressed me a lot in the preseason. Again, unless something absurd happened, there was never going to be anything more than the 4 players that you mentioned at this spot.
Linebacker. This is one where there were some question marks, especially behind Demario Davis and Pete Werner. We got some answers. Obviously, the 2 guys I just said, Demario Davis, Pete Werner, both made the team. DeMarco Jackson, super happy for him.
Yeah.
Love, you guys are tired of me saying this, but I love my small school North Carolina guys. DeMarco Jackson at App State makes the team after missing all last year due to injury. Very happy for him. Swell makes the team. And then I guess the one that, listen, if you guys want to go back to the archives and you want to watch the end of last week's show when we talked about this, Bob and I were both in agreement. Zach Bond was going to make the team strictly because of the same reason we said Traquan Smith would make the team.
Well, yeah.
Experience, and the argument I had was special teams value. Zach Bond makes the team once again.
Yeah. Traquan Bond did make the team. I didn't have him on any of my projections. I saw no reason for him to make the team. And from this point forward, he will be known as Traquan Bond to me. DeMarco Jackson, I'm really excited to see what DeMarco can do. I've been high on him since the pre-draft process last year. Sewell played his way onto this team. Looked extremely impressive from the start of training camp on all through 3 preseason games. I was afraid that Traquan Bond would make this team. And I knew, knowing the Saints coaches the way we do, we thought that it was a strong possibility. But the most shocking roster move of the day for me came when when New Orleans announced the release of Jalen Smith. That's where my jaw just dropped. And I am not going to tell you which one of us said it. And believe it or not, it wasn't me that said it first. Which one of us said this in the Saints News Network chat? But the writer that said this said, and I quote, "I don't know what the hell they are thinking over there." That's a mic drop statement. Jalen Smith. I've teased the practice squad segment. Jalen Smith did sneak him back onto the practice squad. I am sure that we'll see him in regular season games. But again, the gamble that they took just to get the veteran back. Yep. Yeah, I know he was out there on the free agent market forever, but he showed other teams that he could still play through 2 preseason games. I really thought that another team would snatch him up. So those of you that were trying to make sense of the gamble that the Saints did by releasing Jalen, I get the gamble. I just don't know why they made it. Luckily, it worked out for them, and they get to keep keep the experience of Jalen Smith, at least on the practice squad where they could bring him up, and they get to keep their precious Traquan Bond. So I guess there you have it.
To put it in the gambling terms or the card terms, the Saints were saved by the river on that one.
Yes, sir.
That was a tough one. That was tough. I was really shocked because of how I don't think he did anything that was mind-blowing in the preseason, mind-blowing in training camp. But the fact that you bring in a veteran who's capable, I don't think it gets talked enough about when it comes to his career. And I know it's, as a journalist or as a writer, as a podcaster, someone whose job it is to essentially tell a story and try to shed positive light on it. You never want to go back to an injury and make it that all about somebody's career. But if he doesn't get hurt at Notre Dame, he's a top 5 pick.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no questions asked. He's a top 5 pick. He flips into the second round. Some people thought he'd fall farther.
Mm-hmm.
And he's had a good career. I've always said, if you last more than like 2 years in the league, you've had a good career. He's had a good career. And for Dallas, it was a starter for New York last season. I thought it was a major risk because, and Bob and I have talked, again, for you guys that are in here every single week, you guys know what I'm talking about. DJ, Anna, I got to keep scrolling through, make sure I'm not, Eric, John, Jerry, Trav 504, like all of you guys know what I'm talking about. You guys that are here every single week know Bob and I have talked about all summer long. Depth at linebacker was a concern because it takes one injury and all of a sudden you go from, essentially DeMario and Pete Warner, one of the better linebacking duos in football, to all of a sudden you're starting a rookie, regardless of who it was going to be. And DeMarco's not a rookie, but he's a rookie. It's going to be his first NFL snaps, right? Does the NFL look at that? The NFL looks at that like that, right? Because the NBA does not. Okay, how to clarify that? Because I was getting confused. Like, wait, no. The NBA considers you a rookie if you don't play a game,
right?
Which doesn't make. I mean, I guess it makes sense, but it also, for the sake of awards, doesn't make sense anyway. No, it was a big risk to cut Jalen and try to sneak him back. I think what's ultimately going to happen, and Bob's alluded to this with some other guys as well, there's other moves that are going to happen over the next couple days, and we'll talk a little bit on that. Just some rumblings we've heard.
Mm-hmm.
But with some of those other moves that are bound to happen, I think Smith gets elevated.
Yeah,
pretty quickly. And we'll talk more about the practice squad. Let's finish out with the defensive backs and then the special teamers. Corners. Again, I don't really see any question marks here. Marshawn Lattimore, Paulson Debo, Lante Taylor, Lonnie Johnson, Isaac Yidium. I mean, like, is there anything there that really makes you go, outside of the fact that they cut Bradley Roby?
Yeah, and I was going to ask you if you were surprised by Roby.
Yes, very.
Okay. We did kind of caution people, way back before minicamp, between the draft and minicamp. We were talking about Saints veterans that could potentially be traded during training camp. Roby's name was mentioned by both of us. Now, we didn't feel that it was a strong possibility, but we threw it out there because of the talented trio of Marshawn Lattimore, Lante Taylor, and Paulson Adebo. Now, Roby played a lot of slot corner for this team the last couple of years. Alante is working into that role, and they want him to be their slot corner for the simple reason that if he works out there, that means that Adebo, Taylor, and Marshawn are all on the field at the same time. That's a tough trio to pass against. I know Alante had some struggles there in the preseason, and there will be growing pains, but the team felt strong enough about him to let Roby go. What surprised me a little bit about it was that we were hearing reports even yesterday morning that the Saints were fielding trade calls for Roby and probably other players too, but Roby was specifically mentioned. I find it interesting that was the rumor, but then they went ahead and released Bradley.
They didn't get any trade compensation back.
Right.
Even if somebody calls you and goes, "Hey, I'll give you a 7th round pick right now for Bradley Roby," you're not taking on any cap.
Right.
You're not taking on any money. Certainly there was a team that was offering a late round pick. And to me, a late round pick, a day 3 pick, is more valuable than nothing.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where I was a little surprised. But other than that, I don't think there was any surprises. I do want to go back because we are a little bit running behind in terms of our time and schedule. So I did want to go back and get this comment. Scott Shanley said he didn't understand the shock of not putting Jalen on the initial 53 because Jalen only does one thing. Saints open spots, needed players doing multiple jobs. Take that with what you will, but if the Saints value, and we know this because we've talked about it way too much tonight, if the Saints value NFL experience as much as the Saints value NFL experience, why take the gamble?
Yeah.
Right? And you're not talking, again, it is one thing to have NFL experience by being a special teamer your whole career, and then them coming in and expecting you to be like a number 3 linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
or a high quality backup linebacker.
Yeah, and here's the thing, and I get Zach Vaughn's special team value. I do, and that's the only time I will refer to him as Zach is when he plays on special teams. And I'm not discounting that factor. It is vital. But we've seen special teams be a big decision deciding factor. Throughout a lot of positions on this roster. You don't think they kept Isaac Yiadom because they think he's a better cornerback than Bradley Rowe? Hell no. They kept Isaac because he's very good on special teams. He's abysmal in coverage, but he's good on special teams. Dennis Allen did kind of hint at this. Coming into the Houston game, that Jalen is going to have to show that he could play special teams, and he really didn't. But as far as defensively, you mean to tell me that you want to see Traquan Bond in your defensive lineup over Jalen Smith? I don't care that Jalen Smith is not a 3-down linebacker. Just like Jimmy Graham on offense, he doesn't need to be. He's still an upgrade over Bond. He still brings much needed experience over either Sewell or DeMarco. Jalen can cover. He showed that in the preseason. And he's not as bad a run defender as what he's given credit for. He's not a guy that's going to lower his head and shoulders in the trenches and be a factor like Warner or DeMario. But he plays with proper positioning. He can set the edge, and he's an explosive player that can get into the backfield like that. So from that aspect, he's certainly effective against the run. And again, I only have to ask, who do you want if you're playing the Saints defensive scheme? Who do you want on defense? Do you want Jalen Smith or do you want Traquan Bond?
Like I said, if the Saints value experience as much as we know that they do, it was a shocker. Let's talk about the safeties and the special teamers. Then we got to run through that practice squad pretty quick.
Yeah.
And then I don't want to say break news, but share some rumblings that we're hearing might be the best way to put it. Safeties. This was a position you and I talked about a little bit, and I think you and I both went 5 for 5 here. We talked last week. The Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, Marcus May, Jordan Howden, Ugo Amadi, and then JT Gray. I don't think there's any surprises there. JT Gray obviously making the roster because of special teams, as we talked about. Amadi had a really impressive preseason.
Yeah.
Jordan Howden, 5th-round draft pick, kind of expected him to make the roster, and then your 2 starters from last year. Nothing super surprising, yeah?
No, and like you said, we called it. And you left it, Lonnie Johnson should be listed at cornerback, but Lonnie Johnson made the cut too. We talked about what made Bradley Roby expendable and how they want Alontae Taylor to play in the slot. Even if there's some bumps in the road there, Amadi showed that he could play in the slot. They brought Lonnie Johnson in specifically because they see him playing a PJ Williams type of role. We've seen Tyrann Mathieu play in the slot too. So they do have other options there. Safety. If you'd asked me, and people did, if you'd asked me at the beginning of camp, was Ugo Amadi, did he have a shot to make the roster? I'd have laughed and said no. Maybe practice squad. He was my biggest training camp surprise, but he absolutely played his way onto this roster. I mean, I continue to be. I don't know what he's going to give you in the regular season or how much playing time he's going to get, but he definitely earned a spot on this roster.
Absolutely. One of the feel-good stories. Speaking of feel-good stories, here's a couple. And this is the special teamers. I mean, maybe the biggest shocks of yesterday. That was Blake Grupe winning the kicking job over Will Lutz, who got shipped to Denver for a 7th-round pick. And I will go ahead, and I know some people are making jokes about it online, but I'll go ahead and be one of the first to say it on a show. It would not shock me whatsoever if Will Lutz comes close to or does break the NFL record if he's got to kick a long one in Denver this year because of the altitude and some of the kicks we've seen Will Lutz make over his career. The altitude in the Mile High City, I mean, you could add another 5 yards to about any kick.
Yeah.
And we've seen him warm up and kick some 65-yarders inside of a dome. So I'm just saying, I'm going to throw that out there. Lou Headley wins the punting job from Blake Gillikin. I'm probably a little bit more surprised than that over Groupie over Lutz.
Yeah.
Because of how high the Saints were on Gillikin, how high Thomas Morstead was high on Blake Gillikin. The Gillikin one just it's surprising. I'm sorry, we forgot Zach Wood, but Zach Wood, the longtime long snapper, back with the New Orleans Saints. But that one surprised me more than the kicking job. Is Gillikin losing the punting job? What say you, Bob?
Yeah, it did me too. And listen, neither punter impressed me. I felt like they would go. For a team that values experience, and we saw that philosophy repeat itself, position after position after position, and breaking this down tonight. For them to go with two rookies, as their kickers, I think it causes everybody to raise an eyebrow. Headley didn't outkick Gillikin. But Gillikin didn't outkick Headley either. I'm very interested to see what happens at this punter position. Groupie, I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it. I'm not saying that I'm surprised. I'm a little bit surprised at the way it went down. I expected them to go with Lutz for one more year, play out the final year of his contract, and try to stash Groupie on injured reserve where not another team could touch him. I don't have a problem with them shipping Will Lutz out to Denver. Again, like you said with Roby, Brendan, they had an opportunity to get something for Will Lutz. And let's face it, you weren't going to get any more than a 6th or 7th rounder for any kicker ever. So they got what they could for him, and they felt confident to go with Blake Groupie. Now, I'll caution this. We have seen this story play out in horrific fashion throughout NFL history, where a rookie has outkicked or won. Groupie did not outkick Lutz. He just equally performed him to the point that the Saints felt like that the veteran Lutz was a little bit expendable, that they could go with a younger leg, to get more seasons out of him. But we've seen it play out in the past where this scenario has played itself out, and the rookie that got the job couldn't stand up to the pressure come the regular season. So that's definitely going to be a position to watch. But I'm rooting for him. Groupie seems like a fun young kid.
Try that again. For a team that values experience as much as they do, I think Groupie and Lutz were going head to head. Like you said, I expected more. And we kind of joked about it last week. We expected Groupie to have a mysterious left pinky toe injury that put him on injured reserve for the year. That's what I expected.
Yep.
Gillikin, I just expected to hold off, despite having a down year last year. But, we'll see. We'll see. To put your trust in special teams defines the outcome of so many games. So to put your trust into some young people, I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do, but it's definitely, we talked about the gambler's mentality, and they showed it with Jalen Smith. I mean, that's the gambler's mentality right there. It's high risk, high reward. And that's what the Saints are going to try with those two young kids. So that's the initial 53-man roster. Let's talk about the practice squad for a couple minutes before we go. And John Butler saying essentially what I was saying.
Yeah.
Can look really smart, or not. All right, let's talk about the practice squad. So first off, Bob, I'll let you explain it. I'll go ahead and explain. There's a lot of different things going on with the practice squad this year, right?
Yeah, there is.
That are different than years past. So do you want to kind of get everybody up to date before we talk about the guys that got on the practice squad?
Yeah. The practice squad again this year will be made up of 16 players. 10 of those players have to have 2 years or less of accrued NFL experience. There are no restrictions for the other 6 players, so they could be veterans of any age and any experience. Another, and this is a big change this year, you can elevate a practice squad member to your active game day roster the day of a game this year. As long as it's done when inactives have to be declared 90 minutes before kickoff, that's significant because in years past, you would have to declare a practice squad player eligible, elevate him, up to 2 days before a game. Now you could do it right at game day. So if you have a last minute injury, or a guy that's a game day decision all day long, and you make the decision on a Sunday morning, he's not going to be able to go. You can elevate this guy. You could do that with up to 2 players per week. You can elevate, you don't have to, when you do that with a guy, you don't have to cut him, hope he clears waivers, and bring him back to the practice squad, after a game. If you don't activate him, you could just send him right down to the practice squad. Another big change is another team still can't, you still can't sign a practice squad player off of another team, but you have to, when you do it, that player has to be a game day active that week. That part hasn't changed. What has changed is your opponent for that coming week. So for the Tennessee Titans, it's the game one opponent. The Tennessee Titans cannot sign any players off the New Orleans Saints practice squad for that week. The Saints cannot sign any players off the Tennessee Titans practice squad for that week. Another rule that that it is the same is you can elevate a practice squad player to your active roster 3 times during the course of a year. On the 4th time, you either have to leave them activated on your 53-man roster, or you have to release them. And if you want them back, they'll have to go through the waiver wire process first. Those are, like I said, a couple of significant rule changes, but a couple that remain the same too. And I hope that clears it up for some people that are, I know it can be confusing sometimes.
Well, and they change it every year. It's always confusing.
Yeah.
It's confusing for us every year having to figure it out. But let's talk about the guys that made the practice squad before we let you guys go for the evening. Jonathan Abram, another veteran guy that I was surprised actually made his way through waivers. Just going to be honest. Lynn Bowden, Ryan Conley, Shaq Davis, Mark Evans II, Jack Hepplin, Anthony Johnson, John Trey Kirkland. You got to know that name from a particular college nearby. Tommy Kramer, Nico Lalos, Ellis Merriweather, Storm Norton, Anthony Orji, Kyle Phillips, Ty Summers, and Jalen Smith. Bob, any of those names really surprise you? Are there any that you're excited about that the Saints were able to kind of stash onto the practice squad? And what can you expect with some of those names? What are some of the rumors you're hearing about some potential changes to this practice squad as soon as tomorrow?
Well, and there are going to be changes. First of all, Marcus May will be suspended at some point, probably early in the year. It hasn't happened yet, but we know it's going to. We mentioned Landon Young, Traquan Smith, Kirk Merritt as possible short-term injured reserve guys. I know Dennis Allen said today he doesn't foresee that happening. Well, here's proof that Dennis Allen is lying. There are 2 running backs coming to town, coming to New Orleans tomorrow. Jordan Mims, undrafted rookie cut by the Buffalo Bills, and a guy a lot of you guys might recognize this name, Tony Jones Jr. They are both going to be added to the New Orleans Saints practice squad officially tomorrow. Now, if you were counting while Brendan was naming names, Brendan named 16 names. 2 got to go. Whether they're maybe they're cut directly from the practice squad, maybe they are elevated to the active roster to create room for Mims or Jones, and if so, 2 guys off of the active roster got to go. Maybe they're cut, maybe they're put on injured reserve. Clearly, Dennis Allen's math ain't mathing. So that's what we know is going to happen tomorrow. We're obviously thrilled that Jalen Smith was able to come back. I'm equally thrilled. I know a lot of you guys are thrilled that Shaq Davis was able to come back to the practice squad. I'm happy, but not surprised. I'm happy they were managed to bring John Trey Kirkland and Lynn Bowden back, because we still don't have an answer to the kick return position. thrilled that they're bringing Ellis Merriweather back. And I find it very interesting that they kept Traquan Bond on the active roster, but they have 4 linebackers on the practice squad. So that's a development worth paying attention to also.
I believe so. What you said too with the running backs coming to town tomorrow and that are expected, I think we should say that because we've heard a couple different things, but expected for both those guys to sign tomorrow to the practice squad. Wouldn't surprise me to see Smith get elevated. Right, they take that whole gamble. He gets elevated anyway. And just to kind of recap, why would the Saints do that? Because if they'd put someone on injured reserve before yesterday, they're out for the whole year. If they were able to get to today and then throw them on a short-term injured reserve, they miss 4 weeks, they come back. Or a little bit longer, but a minimum of 4 weeks, and they can come back. You look at a guy like Traquan, who, we don't really know the severity of the injury right now, but a guy like that. So, with that said, you did have to gamble with some guys and hope that they could come back to the practice squad and then elevate them up. So I think Jalen Smith's a real possibility there. I'm kind of curious, too, because if I mathed right, and I'll double-check my math, because I'm not good at it. I never claimed to be. So Ellis Merriweather plus 2 other running backs. That's 3 running backs on the practice squad. I know he was healthy, but I know he battled a couple injuries as well. Kendre Miller. Kirk Merritt's a guy where do you really trust him with running back snaps at this point if it's required? To bring back a familiar face, I think, says a lot too with Jones Jr. if that ends up happening like he's expected to. I think that's another thing to watch out for is what the Saints do with that running back room while Kamara is suspended, because also remember, Kamara doesn't count against the 53-man right now.
Right.
So there's a lot of things, a lot of movements going to happen the next couple of days, but that should get you guys caught up on the 53-man roster, give you guys a little bit of analysis from that. The practice squad, give you guys a little bit of analysis on that, and give you guys a little bit of a heads up on some moves that are going to happen tomorrow. So I think we checked all the boxes today, Bob. And we gave you guys some exciting news and how to join us somewhere else throughout the season. And we didn't mention this, so I'll mention this as well. There is going to be it's all going to be free, but there are going to be subscriptions that you're going to be able to purchase for some exclusive content that Bob and I put out. So if you guys like us and like the content that we put out, we would certainly appreciate that. You guys can find out more about that as you download the app and we get into the NFL season. But for now, Bob, you've had a busy week writing articles. You've had a busy week jumping on shows. Where can people follow you and all your work?
For now, I could still be followed over on Facebook, Bob Rose. Twitter at BobbyR2613. Those two things aren't going anywhere. All of our articles are also streamed through the Saints News Network at Saints News on Twitter. That's not going anywhere. I'm still going to be unless Kyle Mosley fires me anytime soon. Knock on wood. Still going to be a member of the Saints News Network team. And folks, don't forget about our Bayou Blitz Facebook page and at Bayou Blitz Pod Twitter account. A lot of what we do and a lot of what we're going to continue to do with PSF is also going to be streamed through our Bayou Blitz pages. We're going to start to do more exclusive things, like Brendan said. We would like eventually for the Bayou Blitz, we're considering the possibility of moving the Bayou Blitz also, to that sort of environment. But it depends on you guys. You guys have given us your support so far. You've made this thing grow. That's what's causing the causing the attention of other apps like PSF and other avenues. It's because of you guys. So for that and for so much else, we give you our heartfelt thanks. And keep it up. Please keep it up. I hope that we're giving you a good enough product that you can call yourself proud to be owners of the Bayou Blitz.
Yeah, little did you guys know, you guys have an ownership stake here. For myself, you can follow me Twitter, Instagram at BT Boylan. Another thing that's going to be really exciting too is Bob and I are going to be able to get together here in a couple weeks for the Saints coming to town in Charlotte. We gave away 2 footballs. Bob referenced joining the Bayou Blitz Facebook page, the Bayou Blitz Twitter page. I'm going to take it a step further. We're going to need you guys to also be in the Saints fans chat room on PSF. And Bob and I are going to give away a third and final one of these when Bob's in Charlotte for the week 2 matchup against the Carolina Panthers. We're going to run the giveaway on Twitter, but you also need to be in the Saints fans chat room on the PSF app in order to win. So you really got to be stalking us and following us everywhere. That's what we're saying. Nonetheless, we're so thankful for each and every one of you hanging out with us week in and week out. Until next Wednesday, hope you guys find some peace, spread love, practice positivity, and we'll continue to update you about our next adventures. Until then, we'll see you next week for another episode of the Bayou Blitz.